this video, we're going to be building one of the most insane gaming PCs I've ever put together, featuring MSI's brand new RTX 3090Ti, a Z690 motherboard, Core i9. We really have gone all out with this awesome system. I'll be covering off all the component choices we made and why, more importantly, putting the system together as we go, and then checking out the performance a little bit later in a detailed benchmarking section. Let's do this.
I just wanna
The Cooler Master CK721 is the latest 65% keyboard on the block, featuring mechanical switches, customizable RGB backlighting, and a portable design. With hybrid wireless tech, you can choose between USB-C, 2.4 GHz, or Bluetooth. Plus, with a removable aluminium top plate, great for modding, a 3-way rotary encoder, and space grey and silver white colorways available, there's plenty to choose from. Learn more at the first links in the description below. We're going to kick things off by taking a look at the motherboard and CPU first off. The Intel 12th gen platform that really makes this build possible in the first place. At the heart of the system is Intel's Core i9 12900K. To coin a frankly awful phrase, this is like the brain of the PC build. It's going to deal with all the complicated maths equations, and most importantly, ensure our CPU has enough bandwidth to cope with the GPU's power requirements. What I mean by that is if your CPU can't keep up with your GPU, you're in a whole heap of trouble, and the brand new 3090 Ti delivers a huge amount of power as far as processing goes. With one of these latest 12th gen chips though, you need a 12th gen motherboard to match up, and MSI's Z690 Tomahawk Wi-Fi is the perfect choice. It's not the world's most expensive Z690 motherboard, which I like, but it still comes crammed with all of the latest features. Whether that be PCIe Gen 5 for the latest and upcoming powerful graphics cards, Gen 4 for our NVMe SSDs, and loads of heat spreaders and heat sinks to keep things nice and cool, it ticks all the boxes. The I/O is also really strong with 10 gigabit USB and 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, rounding off a really nice suite of features. We're going to follow things up by actually installing the processor into the motherboard, which is a little bit more complicated with the new 12th gen and Z690 socket, but not too difficult, as you can see just here. I'll pop links to all the components in the description below and in the card section now, but MSI are doing a bundle for my UK viewers where you can pick up all the MSI components in one great value package, and I'll leave that linked in the description below. What we're going to do next up is we're going to install the RAM, or the memory. This right here is a Corsair Vengeance DDR5 kit. Now just how much RAM you go for really depends on what you intend to use a system like this for. If you're looking to do gaming, a 32 gig option like this is going to make perfect sense. Video editing, you might want more like 64 gigs. And advanced 3D rendering, you might want 128 or hell, even more. For us today though, two 16 gig DIMMs will work well, provide plenty of fast DDR5 RAM, and also ensure that we've got room for upgrades later on, with two spare DIMM slots, giving us 64 gigs of potential memory without having to throw this kit away or sell it on. Slot your RAM into place nice and easily. This stealthy all black kit goes well with what we're doing in this build. We're not trying to cram too much RGB inside of the case, we're going to leave that for the outside and go for quite a sleek, unified look in this one. Finally, to wrap things up, we can install the SSD into the motherboard. This is MSI Spatium M480, and once again feeds into our powered by MSI build aesthetic today. With read and write speeds up to 7 gigabytes per second, it goes pretty close to Seagate's FireCuda 530 and beats out other Gen 4 NVMe options quite considerably. The drive also comes with a built-in heatsink to make things nice and good in the temperature department, as you can see, and is presented in this really nice sort of Spatium M480 presentation box. Notably, the heatsink can be removed if you'd rather use your motherboard's built-in heat spreaders, but I think I like the gold MSI aesthetic, so I'm going to remove the heat spreader, slide our M.2 drive in at a 45-degree angle, and fasten it down. We'll pop this spare heat spreader inside our motherboard's box, and maybe use this at a later date if we opt to switch up the M.2 config. Well, that was nice and easy and allows us to move on to the next component in our build, the case. Picking a chassis to house your system is never an easy choice, especially when it weighs this much. This is a great option though, and comes in from Corsair, their IQ5000T RGB. This is an all black case design with plenty of RGB, giving us a nice bit of colour customization, if you will, while also staying sleek and true to the theme of the build that we're looking to achieve. I'm so out of breath after that. This motherboard also has Corsair IQ support, meaning we can control RGB strips and other stuff through the motherboard, making our life even easier. I think I'm going to unbox the case off camera and rejoin you in 3, 2, 1... It's not a small case by any means, but boy does it look good. And what we're going to do is going to strip it down. We're going to take off the front panels, we're going to take off the rear steel and front glass side panel, and lay the chassis flat for the next stage, which is installing the motherboard into the case. With this being a full-size ATX case, all of the standoffs are in the right place, meaning we've simply got to slot the motherboard into the chassis. The built-in I/O shield as well means we haven't got to worry about that as a factor either, and the board will sit nice and pretty. We can screw it in with 3 screws at the top, 2 along the middle, as the middle standoff, the most central one, is actually a post to hold the motherboard in place, and then a further 3 along the bottom. And once you've done that, the motherboard's in, and we can look at the cooler next up. While we're here, we also need to just go ahead and unscrew the controller at the rear of the case, only temporarily. Now, unscrewing this is going to give us greater access to the rear tray of the motherboard. If I pull that out, you can see exactly what I mean. We can now reach these 4 holes at the back, which we're likely to have to deal with when it comes to popping in that CPU cooler. In particular, I've picked up the MSI Coreliquid S360 with a screen and 3 fans that aren't RGB but do look pretty sick. I think it's going to be an awesome choice. MSI, like many brands, have branched out into making more and more components, and the coolers I've seen of theirs so far look really nice. It also adds into that cohesive build aesthetic that I mentioned earlier, and these fans actually look really quite cool. We'll get some nice B-roll of those for you without the plastic bags on getting in the way. I think what we're going to do is install the radiator at the top of the case with the fans on, exhausting air through the chassis, and then deal with the CPU water block. Make sure to pop the fans on the bottom of the radiator in the right orientation. It sounds obvious, but the last thing you want is you pulling air in the wrong directions, as that's not going to do any good for the cooling in your case. To pop the water block on, you want to take this sort of flexible plastic backplate with these screws that adjust in each corner up and down. What we're going to do is we're going to pop those through these 4 holes on the rear of the motherboard. Adjust each of them so that it slots through the motherboard no problem, before spinning the case around and adding in these male-to-male posts, not only securing the backplate into place, but providing mounting screws for the water block too. What we're then able to do is take the water block as is with this nice metal bracket, slot this over those screws and secure it down with the large thumb screws you get with the cooler. Add in a dab of thermal paste as well to create that nice thermal bond. And that's pretty much it. We can tuck all the cables and wires away and deal with these a little bit later. And then after that, we can move on to the GPU. Now, the GPU is the bit of this build that gives it the wow factor. The brand new RTX 3090 Ti is Nvidia's highest end GPU ever, with an absolutely astonishing 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X VRAM, a ridiculous amount of CUDA cores, SMs, and great ray tracing capability. It just takes everything Nvidia do well and pushes it to the max. It absolutely annihilates anything AMD currently have on offer, though that might change. Check out a video we made recently discussing new GPU rumours and releases. This though looks to be Nvidia's highest end card for at least the foreseeable future, providing ridiculous specs to those with a wallet deep enough to stomach the pain. Now, in response to one of my other recent videos, this GPU is not meant to be the price to performance king. Quite the opposite. You're getting in 5, 10 or 15% over the original 3090 and more over a 3080 Ti for the sake of maximum performance possible. If you want the highest end performing single GPU setup, this is your only option. And Nvidia know that, which is why you'll pay a price premium for it. It's also such a powerful GPU that you have to have a staggering 3 8-pin PCIe power connectors, which comes from an adapter which uses a much smaller Nvidia proprietary connection. It's likely we'll see this connector roll out on next-gen PCIe 5 power supplies, so hopefully in a year or so's time you won't have a horrible dongle to deal with. This right here is a true triple slot GPU, taking up 3 of our PCI lanes and thus wiping out any chances of a vertical GPU mount in the build today. That's okay though, we're going to mount it horizontally in the case, which will mean taking out another one of our PCIe lanes. 4K gaming is very much so where the 3090 Ti feels at home, and it gives us a glimpse as to what mainstream GPUs could look like in a few years' time on the performance front. The MSI Suprim X is also one of my favourite cooler designs ever. We loved both of their 3080s, the 10 and 12 gig variants, and this card is no different. You can read a full review of the card over on our website GeekaWhat.com, which is newly revamped for 2022, so please do check that out. We're putting a lot of time and energy into it at the moment. For now though, let's install the graphics card a bit like so, and then after that we can look at the power supply. Now for a build like this, we need to make sure all of our components have got plenty of power to keep them juiced up and ready to go. The 3090 Ti, as we mentioned, is such a power hungry GPU too, that you need to make sure you've got a unit that can really supply all of the wattage it requires. This MSI 1000 watt is the perfect addition to the build today, and comes with a bag of cables as heavy as a very large bowl of fruit, aka there's lots of cables for any components that you might possibly want to install. Now this video isn't going to be a full cables and wiring guide, but we have got a full article and video content to match over on our website, which I'll link in the card section now. Today we're going to time-lapse the installation of the power supply, and I'll rejoin you in just a few moments to see how this absolutely ridiculous system performs. Before any of that though, it's time to see how good the build looks in an awesome glam montage in the typical GeekaWhat style. See you in a second.
I just wanna
Awesome stuff! Now we've seen just how good this 3090 Ti system looks, it's time to make sure the performance numbers stack up equally as well, and I'm glad to report some great mileage. On your screen now is a summary of all the results we were able to gather, but we will of course be diving in title by title, taking a look in more detail. Starting off with GTA 5. Here we tested at 4K high settings and managed to pull in 158 frames per second on average, with 149 and 142 for the 90 and 99th percentiles. It was a similar story in Battlefield 2042, where at 4K high with DLSS set to performance, we pulled in just shy of 100 FPS, 95 frames per second to be precise. 90 and 99th percentile results were consistently strong too, which was great to see, and the game looked amazing at 4K. Another game that looked amazing at 4K was COD Vanguard, where the results literally blew me out of the water. 4K, high settings, DLSS enabled, 198 frames per second in one of the latest AAA titles at 4K. The 3090 Ti is an incredibly powerful GPU, and the numbers really show it. For anyone asking why we're not testing at 1080p, this is why. 200 frames at 4K. Wow. In Forza Horizon 5, we also tested it, you guessed it, 4K resolution, ultra settings, and pulled in more than 100 frames per second. 105 to be precise. That's more than enough for a racing title, where typically around 60 FPS would be good enough, and that's what you'll find yourself seeing on the next gen consoles at 4K. Moving on to Halo Infinite next up, 4K high settings, and it was a similarly positive story. 116 frames per second. As ever, all of our frame rate numbers were tested with MSI Afterburner's Riva Tuner and Nvidia FrameView. Next up is Apex Legends. Here we tested at 1440p this time. Our 4K mileage only gave us 120 FPS. I say only, but at 1440p that catapulted up to 222 frames per second. Wow. Really solid frame rates here, some great results in Apex Legends, and the game looked amazing. Finally, to wrap things up, we tested out a bit of Fortnite, and this time we did try 1080p competitive, just to see what we could achieve. 291 frames per second is what that was. An unbelievable frame rate in Fortnite competitive settings, which shows the 3090 Ti is well and truly in its depth, whatever game you choose to play at whatever resolution. And with that, that just about wraps it up for our 3090 Ti build guide. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to get subscribed to see more from us. Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.